All right, Kevin back with you. And I am really excited for this episode of the podcast. And Lukas, welcome, man. Great to have you here today.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate being able to catch up.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we were talking before we hit the record button, and I was like, okay, when was it that we met? And we figured out it was about 10 years ago, and man, there's been a lot of water under the bridge for both of us since we first met, and I and I still remember that meeting. I mean, that is just one of those, you have these experiences in your life that you witness stuff, and you're just like, you know what? Man, that's something that I've never forgot that. I've always remembered that meeting and just how you were just brought into this world, and it just all because of a conversation at the right time, right place, and you guys just made a connection, and maybe I don't know, maybe you'll talk about that, maybe you won't, but I've always remembered that. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of start off, but I'll turn it over to you and just to share a little bit about what you do, who you serve, what motivates you to do what you do, and just let everybody kind of get a little bit of context for who Lukas is. And we'll just kind of start there.
Sure. So the way I usually explain it is I'm a copywriter and I also am a trainer. So I work with private clients on the copywriting side, all things direct response, all things primarily online. I've done some offline stuff too. And then I train writers. So I train junior writers, I train senior writers, and I've got a couple like copy chief / CMO type people in my training side. And that's what I've been doing since, well, I've been writing copy since 2013, and I've been training since 2016.
Okay.
That's my thing. So we can dive into details if you want, but
yeah. I mean, so how did you get into doing this, Lukas?
Sure. And I don't want to bore anybody because then, the people listening here kind of heard origin stories and stuff, but I came at this whole thing in a roundabout way. I thought I was going to be a career military officer.
Okay.
That was what my entire life was guiding towards until I turned 20. I was in the RTC program in college. I had been training to, I thought that I was going to be a Navy SEAL. The Navy didn't want me for their college program, so I got into the Army, and so I started going into special forces and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But halfway through college, a couple things happened. I met the love of my life. We started dating, and I eventually married her at the end of college. And I realized that I didn't want to be deployed for half of my life, because that's the life of a person who's a career military officer.
Yep.
And so I made a pretty dramatic life change, which is I chose to sign a contract that put me into the National Guard instead of the active duty, which meant that I only had to drill once a month, but I had a longer commitment. And so the whole thing there, right? But what that also does is now I'm this 20-year-old kid who has thought they're going to be in the military for their entire life. And what do I do now? What kind of skills am I going to deploy into the world to earn a living, to have a career and all that kind of stuff. So the long story short is that eventually I found this world of marketing through several different sources at the same time. I ended up parachuting into events, and that's where we first met. Yep. And got pretty lucky in that as a new person in the industry, I got an opportunity to work with one of the big up and coming companies in the financial publishing space called the Elevation Group. And I worked directly with those founders. I worked directly with them during a period of time that was very exciting in that business. And then my career kind of went off from there. I leveraged those connections. I leveraged the people that I knew, and eventually doubled down into copywriting as a skill set, and eventually realized that other people wanted to learn from active copywriters further down the line. And that's where we're at now. Now I'm realizing that the skill set and the career of copywriter has expanded beyond what we originally think. Like you and I, and probably people who have been CEOs and founders, especially in this space, will recognize names like Gary Halbert, John Carlton, Gary Bencivenga, Bond Halbert. Those guys, like copywriters, those are the names that pop up in your head. But what I've realized, especially since the amazing growth of digital marketing, in all sectors of the economy all over the globe. Copywriting has become less about that long form sales letter, like direct response, direct mail type world, and more about publishing and narrative generation and content in general. So a skill set of copywriting is now being applied to marketing as a whole. And that means copywriters who are better trained, better aware of the different types of industry trends, more confident in their ability to go out into different mediums are incredibly valuable right now. If you're a proficient person who understands what to do, you can essentially walk into any company anywhere in the world and provide a massive amount of value, which in a time where everybody's going remote and everybody wants a better job, and there's some of this frothiness in the world, being able to walk into any company in the world and provide an enormous amount of value is a ridiculously important skill set.
Yeah. So. And I knew that you were a copywriter and had been doing that for some time, but I saw a recent post online from you that I was like, oh, I didn't know he was doing that too, which is the training. Training others. And so what does that look like in your world, Lukas?
Yeah. It started off as an accident because I had too much work and I needed people to help me with it.
Okay.
And so I tried to, my wife had the idea of, hey, maybe instead of paying them to like do your work, maybe they could pay you to learn under you.
Oh, wow.
As you're doing the work. And I'm like, that's an interesting way to do it. So I did. I launched a little beta program that I called a mentorship. Okay. And the whole point was to get them to help me with my workload while I was, like teaching them and giving them value. Mm-hmm. So that failed miserably because they couldn't help me write the copy. The people that would come under my mentorship program weren't proficient enough for me to just hand things off to them. And so I started training. Like I started really training and digging down and going into some of the stuff that I had learned when I was teaching myself. And that transformed that small little group. I think it started at 4 people, then it went up to 7 in like a couple weeks. And every single one of them was just over the moon grateful and achieving amazing results. Like they were getting hired. A couple of them, like one dude who bought the program said, hey, this was the last program that I could ever buy, or else my wife would have divorced me, because his previous 6 years were buying programs and not doing anything, but he bought this one and now he's the CMO of an 8-figure agency.
Wow.
And
nice.
And one of the other guys that I trained early on went into crypto and is working with like 7-figure coins. Just lots of the people who are in that first cohort are now at ridiculous places in their career. And during the time I was like, this is really rewarding. I'm seeing results very quickly for these people. Like they love it. And it's different from the client copywriter relationship in that, if I deliver a piece of copy that performs really well, the client's extremely happy with that, but that was the transaction. That was the point, right? And so there's only a certain amount of like appreciation and value that gets exchanged there. And it's not the same as when you're teaching someone and they're growing in the aha moments and the eyes light up and, like it's transforming their lives. There's a lot more gratification to that process. So I started, I was drawn to that. And with the help of my wife, we created a structure around it. And now we've trained over 200 people at this point.
Wow.
And that's in the full on copywriting and marketing mentorship. I've got another 750 people who I've trained in email marketing and kind of list management type stuff. So we're doing a good job on training people for this skill set. But my next chapter, I guess kind of the thing that I'm working on right now, which may be relevant, is I'm starting to build out the structure behind an actual ecosystem, an actual hiring and training ecosystem that's beneficial for the people eventually hiring these people and the people who are getting the training.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah. Does that answer the question?
That was, Lucas, I really appreciate, because for one, when I saw your post, I was really curious. I'm glad you shared that, because like I didn't know you were doing all that, and that is really cool. And I mean, I'm going to stay in closer touch now, because I want to hear how this continues to unfold. And so I imagine that you kind of found the help that you needed, but then now because of the work that you're doing, you're helping other companies as well as the people that you're training and stuff. And so that is cool. That is cool. Awesome.
Yep.
Well, tell you what, let's switch gears just a little bit now. And what I'll do is I'll reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. And so here we go. Have you ever been introduced to a person that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person? And I'm really excited for you to be able to share your story, your experience around this, to be able to honor somebody who's had such a profound impact on your life and on your business. And I'll just turn it back over to you, Lucas.
So I know you're trying to get us to drill down into one person, right?
Yeah, that's always it. Yeah.
And I will, but I also want to say that as entrepreneurs and as founders and as people doing stuff like this, it's impossible to narrow it down to one person, because there's so many paths, there's so many people, and there's so much change. I saw a beautiful picture the other day on the internet of like a timeline with all of these branching possibilities, where in the past there's a green line threading its way through all of these black branches, because that's the choices and the path that you picked. But on this moment in time, every branching path in front of you is green, because all of those are possible paths that you could take. And so at every moment, there are these bifurcating choices that you can make, and there's these interactions you can have with people and these relationships that'll change things. So I just want to put that out, because I will say that the course of my life is fundamentally changed in a couple different places. I would probably be very different if I hadn't met a couple different people. So I'll list them real quick, and then I'll talk about, I guess, one of them, right?
Okay.
The first one was meeting my wife in college. That changed a very fundamental part of my life.
Okay.
It just completely transitioned my thought of, I'm going to be this type of person to I'm going to be this type of person. And then because of that, a couple years later, I through my own searching and my own parachuting into certain situations and not knowing enough, like being ignorant and being like, okay, what do I do? I stumbled into Yannick Silver's universe, and I met Yannick Silver at the first underground event that I went to. And because I was so young, I fit right into his young entrepreneur goals. Like he was raising a community of young entrepreneurs. And that got me the scholarship from him to the next event where I met Robert and Mike and you. So Yannick has been a continuous force of transformation and positivity for me. Yannick Silver. And right now he runs the Maverick 1000. He's got the Evolved Enterprise intellectual property. And he's got a very progressive, growth-oriented brand of high-functioning entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And so what I've loved is that he's always had that, at least since I've known him, right? Because he was doing things way before me. Since I've known him, he's always had this forward-thinking, positivity-based focus on not only mutual benefit, but like really grounded in the impact that you can make in the world with the right types of people. So very similar to what you're doing with your group. And that mentality and his practice of that mentality, not just the words, but the way that he ran his life was extremely impactful for me. I was really lucky to have fallen into, his world at a very early stage in my entrepreneurial journey, because like I said, I was on a different path, and so there's a lot of different people that I could have fallen in with at that point where you're very malleable. And I'm glad that Yannick was one of those people. So I got to give him massive credit for establishing the framework with which that I kind of started my career. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's pretty important. Another person that fundamentally shifted my my career or in my business was a guy named Colin Chung. And Colin, do you know Colin?
I do know
Okay.
Colin.
Yeah.
I do.
Colin was the lead copywriter at the Elevation Group, and he was my first copywriting mentor. And so he taught me the craft. And the fact that I'm now teaching people the craft and actually doing it myself for clients for the last like 10 years is because of Colin. So
Wow.
I I owe him a lot. He took a risk on me. I had to kind of like beg him to mentor me because that's not what he did. That wasn't
Uh-huh.
part of his
Mhm.
thing. He airshipped me a box full of old controls that had been marked up from Gary Halbert and Ben Savenga and Carlton, and I had to hand copy them. I had to do it when I was in military training. I had to do it when I was in India for a friend's wedding. Like it was hardcore, but he was an incredibly important part of my career. And I think more recently, the person who I can say has impacted my trajectory in a very positive way in the last 5 years is a guy named Nick Peterson. Do you know who Nick is?
I
Okay.
know Nick as well.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, you said Jesse Elder earlier when we were talking, so I figured you might be in that ecosystem. But Nick
Uh-huh.
Peterson is an individual who I've been connected with since I was in LA. And we've kind of floated around each other. I'm not sure, where I encountered him first or who was the introduction or whatever, but since then we've partnered on several things. I'm working with him on several different initiatives, including some of the crypto stuff. I'm now partnered with his partners. Like there's the nice thing about I even did the fitness thing that he did with his former trainer, Dr. Trevor Kashi, and it helped me lose 50 pounds. So I would say that Nick is the catalyst, the introduction of that ecosystem around him that has really fundamentally changed my business and personal and mental life. So I know that's not one person, but that's the chronological thank yous that I could give to the people in my life. And I think that as a founder, it you know what it's really nice to acknowledge the shoulders that you're standing on.
Uh-huh. You
That's
bet.
what it is.
Yeah, you bet. Well, I'm glad you did because you're right. I mean, I have done well, you're the 59th interview that I've done for the $1 Million Relationships podcast. And a lot of people that I've interviewed have said, Kevin, there's a lot of people in my life that have, got me to where I am today and stuff. And I mean, you're the first one that's laid it out like it is and just kind of addressed all of these people that at different points in your life. And what's amazing is, I love it because I'm like, I know every single one of them. And so that's really awesome.
That's what you do. That's what you do, Kevin. That's your whole game.
And I'm thinking like, man, these are some, and it's funny, it's like I met Colin for the first time, the same exact place I met you, same event is where I met Colin for the first time and stuff at Yannick's Underground event. And so well, okay. So now I know you had kind of mentioned before we start recording, it's like, yeah, Kev, I've got, a few people that I just have to talk about and stuff. Is there anybody that you want to go deeper with and on of what you've shared, or do you just kind of want to leave? I mean, because you've got some pretty awesome people in your life.
I mean, I guess for the benefit of your listeners, especially the stuff that I think it matters more about contemporary, like where I am and where I'm going. Right.
Uh-huh.
So if I dive a little bit into showing Nick Peterson some attention and love, I think that that's going to benefit your listeners.
All right.
Because I appreciate Nick for two main reasons. A lot of little reasons, but two main reasons. The first reason is the way that he cultivates a network of high performing, forward thinking, like people who are playing their own game and are experts at their craft.
Yeah.
So to be around Nick is to be around experts in their craft, which
Mm-hmm.
is very cool. So it's worthwhile getting into proximity of an individual who's a center of gravity.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
Like you would understand. I would consider you a center of gravity too. So like that's initially that's one of the main things that I really love about being in relationship with Nick. The second thing is that Nick brings a certain type of operating system to his thinking process.
Yeah.
And it is very grounded in first principles based mental models that allow for people like us, founders, entrepreneurs, people who want to make things happen, change things that are status quo, et cetera, the type of operating system that you're running in your mind matters more than any tactic or strategy that you might pick up, because you're doing something new by definition. As an entrepreneur, you're building something that hasn't existed. You're building a better version of something. That OS that you're running in your head is mission critical, right?
Yes.
And Nick brings a very well thought out operating system that simultaneously is not dictatorial in its adherence. You don't have to do things in his way. You don't have to do things in this way. You can think about things from first principles and discover your own path forward using these types of strategies. That's why people working with Nick don't all look the same. You'll see a lot of masterminds where everybody coming out of the back end of the mastermind has exactly the same website, exactly the same headline, same funnel, and people wonder why those don't get results after a while. Or, you'll find people who are teaching a specific type of tactic and people wonder why that tactic loses effectiveness. It's because they're not operating from, or they're not taking action from this operating system. They're not finding their own way through a new thing. They're trying to emulate or copy something that's been done before. And that has decreasing effectiveness as more people flood into it, especially as similar people flood into it. So Nick brings what I would consider to be a customizable first principles mental framework. Yeah. And I can't tell you how valuable that is, other than to say that I have seen some insane results in a very short period of time from multiple different industries that are not congruent with each other. So if everybody in really incongruous industries are achieving exponential style results, all from the same operating system, but that operating system isn't duplicated in any of them, that's a good sign.
Yeah, there's something there. There's something
there.
And
hopefully that wasn't too esoteric though. That
well, see, I totally get it because I've spent time with Nick, and like the way, I just really appreciate the way Nick thinks, the way he looks at things, because it is so different. It is so different, and you cannot come away from a conversation with Nick without seeing things a little bit different than you did going into it. And so
and also having the ability to honor your own interpretation of that. Rather than thinking, oh, this is something that I need to do now, or this is some tactic I need to run. It's really more of being able to, as a founder, as a CEO, there's a difference between a kind of person who wants to forge their own path into the unknown and someone who wants to tread the line, or walk the line and just do things in a certain way. So there's nothing wrong with either of those, but the forging your own path requires a certain self-confidence that I think a lot of entrepreneurs and founders are, the way that the industry is currently set up from a mass perspective, the industry meaning people who help entrepreneurs and founders, it sets them up to fail in a way, because it tells these people that they're forging into the unknown and they need to do it in a certain way. There's no Lewis and Clark first principles exploration. It's no, you have to go up this river and turn left at this point.
Here's the path. Follow this path.
No, there is no path. Maybe there was a path for that person teaching the path, but they're looking back and you're looking forward. And So that's what I appreciate about Nick the most, is that he brings that ability to navigate forward without dictating how.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a, I'm listening to what you're saying. There's a big difference between coming from a place of feeling like I have to do this or I need to do this versus I get to do this. And coming from the I get to is way more empowering, And so well, I really appreciate what you said. And what's interesting is you are the second person that I've interviewed for this podcast that that honored Nick. So that's awesome.
Who was the other one?
It was Blake. It was Blake Schofeld.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah. And so for anybody listening to this, going, man, Kev, man, I really like Nick. I like what he's up to. I like the way he shows up, man. How can they find out more about what you guys are doing?
Well, him and I are working on a couple things together, but that's all behind the scenes, and so your listeners can maybe experience the results of that, but not necessarily participate. If you want to find Nick, it's just his name, NIC, and then Peterson. Yep. So just Google that. I think that's his website as well. So you'd be able to find that. He doesn't really. You're gonna have to dig deeper to find him now because he's deeper in the crypto space and he's not publishing as often. Yep. But that's one way to go about it. And yeah, just kind of start orbiting. I think that's the best advice. Yeah. Is to start exploring and start orbiting, and eventually, without rushing, you'll probably find something that's helpful, and maybe you'll find something to participate in. Yeah.
And for you, if anybody's curious about your copyright, copywriting stuff, or how you might be able to, might be curious to have a conversation with you. How does somebody go about that, Lucas?
Yeah. So keeping in mind that, your listeners are people who are running companies, then if anybody is hiring copywriters, then I want to talk to you, because I can probably find you a better copywriter faster, for cheaper, and a person who's going to stick with you longer to help you grow than you could do it on your own. Okay. And that's what I want. I want entrepreneurs and founders who are growing companies, who really want to not just, make an offer and earn some money and sit on the beach. No offense to that lifestyle, but that's not the best place for a really high quality copywriter to live, to be in a company. So if you're growing and you want to grow and you have a purpose and you want to bring team on and you're going to be hiring copywriters, then I'd love to talk with you. And I'm easy to find too. It's just my name. So, assuming my name is going to be spelled correctly in the podcast, then you can just Google that and find me.
I'll make sure we get it spelled right, Lucas.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't say that as a knock. I say that as it's very easy to misspell. Sure. Even if I say it out loud, people I've said it out loud on podcasts and people have tried to search for it, and it's just it's chaos. So just copy paste that stuff.
There you go. Yeah. Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation today and share. Any last words before we call it a wrap?
No, thanks. It was great to catch up.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And yes, really appreciate it. And you have a great rest of your day, man.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Kevin.